After saving the crown prince, I didn't reveal my real name, but instead gave the name of a maid by my side. This servant is called Sikwi, because in my previous life, when the crown prince came to propose marriage, he mistook the maid Sikwi for me and fell in love with her at first sight. After years of marriage in the Eastern Palace with no children, the crown prince consoled me and even brought over a child from a branch family to raise under my care. Little did I know those were all children he had secretly fathered with Sikwi, until the day of my enthronement as empress. Sikwi, pregnant, secretly wore my phoenix robe and smiled at me provocatively. This garment truly suits this servant. When I wear it, I look like an empress too. In my fury, I had someone tear the phoenix robe off her body. Just as I raised my hand, I was pushed off the high platform by Xiaoling. I fell into his arms, covered in wounds. He panicked and gripped my hand tightly. I didn't mean to. Sikwi is at fault, but she is pregnant. I just didn't want you to hurt her. In this life reborn, since he has secretly pledged his love to a slave by my side, I'll fulfill his wish and let him marry a household slave as his consort. Returning from offering incense at the National Protection Temple, mountain mist shrouded everything. Samey time, samey place. A figure staggered into view, blood staining his brocade robes, and collapsed in front of the carriage. The carriage stopped abruptly. Ziyun, the maid who accompanied me to offer incense, let out a low cry. Miss, it is a young master who has been injured. Hearing Ziyun's identical words, I didn't move at all. In my previous life, after hearing Ziyun's alarmed cry, I veiled my face and got off the carriage. Using the wound medicine for stopping bleeding that was carried on the carriage, I saved him. Even with a face covered in blood, it still couldn't conceal the injured person's striking brows and starry eyes. His refined and noble bearing. After taking the medicine, the person on the ground improved somewhat. He forced himself up, his gaze exceptionally gentle, and asked me, Miss, what is your surname and name? So that I may repay Mrs. Kindness in the future. At that time, I had reached the age for marriage discussions and was kept in the inner chambers. Father didn't like me showing my face in public. In just a moment's hesitation, he had already lost too much blood and passed out. Starting over this time, looking at the same person who had fainted in front of the carriage, he didn't take out the wound medicine, but instead, retrieved the dagger kept in the carriage for self-defense. The cold gleam of the dagger illuminated my eyes, brimming with icy resolve, thinking of my previous life, after I married into the Eastern Palace, all the wrongs and coldness Xiaoling showed me. In the end, he even personally pushed me off the high platform, leaving me to suffer endless torment filled with resentment, like a phoenix with broken wings, dying in agony in his arms. I gripped the dagger and slowly walked toward the severely injured Xiaoling. It would be better to strike first before he reveals his identity. In this desolate and uninhabited place, to eliminate all future troubles forever. The moment I tightened my grip on the dagger and thrust it toward his chest, the unconscious person suddenly awakened with a will to survive and opened his eyes. His eyes were cold and fierce, suddenly gripping my wrist tightly. What are you planning to do? I kept my composure, my gaze shifting to one of impeccable concern. Young master is injured. I merely wish to cut open your outer garment to check your wounds so I can apply medicine. I couldn't help but feel regretful inside. Such a good opportunity to eliminate a major threat, and I didn't succeed. But in this life, he will surely lose to me. As the crown prince, Xiaoling had shadow guards following him, and soon they would find this place. I lowered my eyes, concealing the hatred within them. Just like the scene from my previous life, beside the veil on my face, a few strands of hair fell down, adding a touch of delicate harmlessness. The way Xiaoling looked at me gradually melted from initial wariness and coldness into gentle complexity. He released his grip, allowing me to cut open his outer robe and bandage his wound. As I withdrew my hand, he suddenly grasped it tightly, The words he spoke were almost identical to those from my previous life. "What is your name, miss? You saved me today. In the future, I will surely visit to thank you for saving my life." Looking at our clasped hands, my eyes no longer held the flustered shyness of a racing heart, only a piece of disgusted coldness. The veil concealed my sneering lips. "In this life, I spoke before he could collapse and pass out. This servant is called Zikwi. Saving you was merely a small effort, young master. Please, don't take it to heart." A flash of astonishment and surprise crossed Xiaoling's eyes. He raised his hand, wanting to lift the veil from my face. This sudden turn of events was beyond my expectations. In my previous life, Xiaoling hadn't held on this long. Nor had he wanted to see my appearance clearly. I abruptly pushed him away, avoiding his touch as if he were a venomous snake, stumbling back 2 steps. It suddenly dawned on me that perhaps I wasn't the only one who had experienced rebirth. Fortunately, Xiaoling's hidden guards found him in time and brought him back to the Eastern Palace. On the way back, Xian couldn't help but ask me in confusion, "Miss, that injured young master just now?" From his clothes and appearance, one could tell he is of extraordinary status. "You clearly saved his life, miss. With such a good opportunity, why did you give Zikwi's name instead?" Zikwi was the head maid in my chambers. She was also the daughter my wet nurse brought into the household, who grew up with me since childhood, practically considered half a young lady in the inner court. Yet, it was this person I regarded as a sister who dealt me the deepest and cruelest blow. I didn't explain much, only letting out a light mocking laugh. "The person he'll fall for sooner or later will be Zikwi anyway. Might as well go with the flow and help them along. You should know, in my previous life, not long after I saved Crown Prince Xiaoling, he personally came to express his gratitude." Zikwi Bang, my personal maid, rushed ahead of me and met him first. Xiaoling fell in love with her at first sight, probably from that moment on, because I wore a veil when I saved him. He didn't know my appearance or identity, so he mistook Zikwi for his savior. By the time I rushed to the front courtyard, Xiaoling had other urgent matters, and had already left in a hurry. He only arranged the marriage with father. When I married into the Eastern Palace, Xiaoling lifted the bridal veil full of anticipation, only to see a completely unfamiliar face. To this day, I still remember his furrowed brows, the disgust after his shock, and how he stepped back. He aggressively questioned me. "Who are you?" I was going to marry the girl who saved me that day, the young lady of the Bai family. After feeling wronged and flustered, I calmed down and explained to him that I was her. But Xiaoling wouldn't listen to a single word. Soft sobbing came from the bridal chamber. Shiquiwon of my dowry maids covered her mouth as she cried out. Xiaoling immediately noticed her. The joy of finding what was lost in his eyes, followed by the regret of understanding. I, as the crown princess he personally married, saw it all clearly. After that day, Shikui became constantly distracted, often gazing outside. She broke my favorite folded waste bowl. I merely scolded her a couple of times. Just then Xiaoling, who happened to be visiting my palace, strode over his python robe, standing squarely in front of Shikui without deviation. With a stern face, he reproached me. "You already stole her life, saving grace and married into the Eastern Palace as you wished. Can't you give in to her a little?" At that time I didn't understand his words, only smelled the heavy scent of alcohol on Xiaoling, and just assumed he was drunk. The next day, after he sobered up, he immediately took Shikui away from me. After that, during the years in the Eastern Palace, I lost the children in my womb multiple times, damaging my foundation, and could never conceive an imperial heir again. When entering the palace to pay respects, even the empress, who had always treated me kindly, looked at me with subtle changes in her eyes. Harshness, disappointment, dissatisfaction. In Kuning Palace, over some trivial matter, I knelt for half a day in the continuous spring rain brushing against my face. Finally, unable to bear it, I found Xiaoling and cried to him. After a long silence, Xiaoling held my hand and comforted me gently. It doesn't matter whether there are children or not, I don't care. Actually, adopting imperial blood from a side branch is just the same. Mother Empress is just too anxious. That is why she is pressing you so hard. At that time, I didn't know that his every considerate word was a knife urging my death. After several sleepless nights of tossing and turning, I agreed to his proposal and brought a child from a side branch to raise as my own. Xiaoling's eyes lit up, flashing with delight, and that night, he exceptionally stayed overnight at my place. If I had been a bit smarter, a bit more perceptive, perhaps I could have discovered his abnormality earlier. A few days later, the palace servants delivered the selected child before me. Xiaoling was all smiles, praising in front of me. This child is plump and adorable, with a full forehead. He is the most outstanding among the imperial clan's children. The moment I saw him, I felt a connection. He'll achieve great things in the future. My face was full of bitterness, my smile extremely forced and pale. Yet he didn't notice at all. Before leaving Xiaoling's study, I saw Sikui. At first glance, he almost didn't recognize her. Her face looked frail, and her body had become much plumper. She actually looked like a married woman. When Sikui saw me, she showed no intention of paying respects. She stared at the child I held in my arms, unable to take her eyes off him. She boldly stepped forward, wanting to snatch the child back from my arms. "Crown Princess, let this servant hold the child." My expression darkened. After years of barely seeing each other, she had become so unruly. Xian, who was by my side, scolded. "How dare you? What is your status daring to fight Her Highness for the little prince? The little prince is precious beyond measure. If he gets bumped or dropped, can a mere servant like you bear the responsibility?" Sikui seemed to snap out of it, reluctant yet pleased. "This servant is of lowly status. I beg your highness to take good care of the prince." The imperial heir in my arms suddenly began crying incessantly. I hurriedly left holding the child, not noticing the strangeness in her words. Over the next 10 years, I raised 4 children one after another, doing my utmost for them. The previous emperor passed away. Xiaoling ascended the throne, and I was naturally appointed empress. It was on that day of my investiture as empress. Sikui appeared on the high platform for the investiture ceremony, looking quite proud, her belly held high, wearing the phoenix robe that had just been rushed out by the Imperial Wardrobe Bureau. Strangely, her build was different from mine. Her body broadened by pregnancy, yet that phoenix robe fit her perfectly, as if it had been custom made for her from the very beginning. My whole body trembled with chills, not daring to think any deeper. I ordered the palace servants to tear the phoenix robe off her body. Sikui tilted her face up, smiling at me mockingly, her expression defiant. I had barely raised my hand. A tremendous force came from behind me. Without even time to turn around to see who it was, I fell from the high platform like a bird with broken wings, in excruciating pain. My eyes filled with tears. I saw Xiaoling running frantically toward me in panic. The bright yellow robe knelt beside me. He gripped my trembling, nissy fingers tightly. "Shijin, he didn't mean to deliberately harm you, to take your life. I was just acting rashly in the heat of the moment. Sikui was in the wrong, but she is pregnant. I just didn't want you to hurt her." The pain left me unable to make a sound. At death's door, I struggled to lift my face to look at the high platform. On the high platform, the imperial heirs I had raised were all gathered around Sikui. The way she looked at me was with the smugness of a victor. Looking closely, those children, their gradually maturing features, actually all resembled her. Ridiculous. The children I raised with my own hands were all hers and Xiaoling's bastards born in secret. I closed my eyes, suffering in agony, before my consciousness completely faded. I heard Xiaoling sigh reproachfully by my ear. "In this life, you should never ever have taken credit for Sikui's kindness, and even suppressed and bullied her." At that moment, I finally understood. Xiaoling had mistaken his savior. And the greatest mistake I ever made was that from the very beginning, I should never have saved that ungrateful wolf. After returning from offering incense, I came back to the Bai family estate. I had the matrons from the back courtyard bring Sikwi and force her to kneel before me. This was the first time I saw her after my rebirth. 22-year-old Sikwi, upon close inspection, vaguely resembled me in appearance, especially that pair of eyes exposed outside. Plus, she had lived well in the Bai family, practically a half-mistress, and I had indulged her greatly, raising her to be delicate and aristocratic. Sikwi knelt on the ground, frightened and uneasy, biting her lip hard. I noticed on her wrist clutching the hem of her dress. She wore an enamel bracelet. The enamel bracelets were originally a pair. One was on my wrist, the other I had originally kept in my vanity case, but later couldn't find it. Unexpectedly, Sikwi had stolen it and worn it on her own wrist. And by chance, this bracelet was the one I wore when I saved Xiaoling. Xiaoling saw the bracelet on her wrist, and so mistook her for me. But in my previous life, she had so many chances to explain, yet she chose to let the mistake continue. She had always been my most beloved, so when I had her dragged here to kneel this time, she still questioned me defiantly. This servant doesn't know what wrong she has committed? Where has she angered miss? I casually put down the tea lid I was using to grind tea leaves, and pointed at her wrist, stealing from the master's household, unwilling heart and unclean hands. According to family law, severe punishment without leniency. What? Sikwi suddenly lifted her face, eyes wide, unable to believe it. Enforce the family law. I repeated flatly. Why haven't you begun the punishment? Not only did she dare not believe it, all the servants in the back courtyard dared not believe it. I treated Sikwi like a sister, and had never punished her before. Do it. Two rough servant women stepped forward, holding a discipline ruler and thick rope in their hands. Sikwi tried to run away, but her struggles were futile. She was instantly restrained tightly. I touched my own flat abdomen, thinking back to my previous life. Every heart-wrenching loss was also her and Xiaoling's handiwork. The rope tightened, the discipline ruler raised high. At first, Sikwi cried and begged for mercy, but later, only fearful sobs remained. Many servants in the back courtyard trembled in fear, not daring to keep watching. Only, I remained calm and gratified from beginning to end. Cruel compared to all her betrayals against me in my previous life. What does this amount to? Accompanied by a shrill wail, Sikwi was on the verge of death. Suddenly, summoning kicked open the back courtyard gate. A golden python-embroidered robe flashed by, knocking down two old women, and embraced the delicate Sikwi, fragile as a pear blossom about to scatter in the wind, into his arms. Xiaoling, who had just bandaged his injuries and rushed to the Bai family in haste, looked at me with eyes full of disappointment. His eyes reddened, filled with rage. I met his hate-filled gaze with complete indifference. Not a single ripple stirred within me. I had seen such a look far too many times in my previous life. As soon as he spoke, it was a low, hoarse rebuke. Bai Shijin, you are so vicious. I have already knelt before the palace and obtained an imperial edict to marry Sikwi as the crown princess. After hearing this, I took a sip of the completely cold tea. The coolness mixed with bitterness went straight to the bottom of my heart. He was even more impatient than in my previous life, unable to wait to marry an illiterate servant as his wife. What I should do, naturally, is to fulfill their wishes. Sikwi is the future crown princess. Who among you dares to lay a hand on her again? The back courtyard fell into shocked silence. Xiaoling's eyes burned as he asked me with a hint of mockery. Bai Shijin, you've been through rebirth too, haven't you? So starting over, you couldn't wait to strike at Sikwi. I sneered coldly. I do not understand what the crown prince means. Xian beside me couldn't help but speak up for me. Sikwi, as a household servant, has repeatedly had sticky fingers, stealing Mrs. Things. Shouldn't she be punished according to household law? Sikwi in his arms woke up at just the right moment, weakly leaning against him, tearfully pleading with me. This servant knows she was wrong. Please, miss, spare this servant just this once. She took off the bracelet from her wrist and returned it to me. In an instant, Xiaoling's pupils suddenly contracted, staring at that enamel bracelet in shock. His voice dry to the extreme, squeezed out from his throat. This bracelet, how is it yours? Ziyun, not understanding. The enamel bracelet is precious jewelry shipped from the West. Naturally, it belongs to my miss. Sikui is merely a servant of the Bai family. Does the crown prince still want to turn the tables on us? Xiaoling's body trembled. No one could even hear the sound of his teeth clenching. He asked me, in the previous life, why didn't you explain? Hearing this, I found it laughable again. I did explain. Did he ever listen? In the end, what could it have salvaged? It was all the same. A heart dead as ashes. I still remember, Ixiki stayed by his side. Though she had no title or status, just a palace maid, Xiaoling treated her differently from others. At an Eastern palace night banquet, she deliberately tampered with things, adding almond powder that imperial concubine Shu couldn't have into the soup. This caused imperial concubine Shu to be humiliated in public, her face swelling up red all over later on. Consort Shu could barely breathe and nearly lost her life. I merely meted out punishment according to palace regulations. Xiaoling stepped forward first to shield her, and the gaze he cast at me was ice. Cold. Everyone makes mistakes sometimes. Shikui just arrived at the Eastern Palace and isn't familiar with many affairs yet. Why must you seize this opportunity to lash out and deliberately make things difficult for her? It is just a trivial matter. And Consort Shu is fine, as Crown Princess. You should be magnanimous in managing subordinates. Being aggressive will only make you lose more hearts. A bucket of cold water, a torrent of rebuke. I was thoroughly reduced to a laughingstock at the banquet. Just then, the imperial edict of marriage that Xiaoling had petitioned for her was delivered to the Bai residence. Everyone went to the front courtyard to receive the edict. The palace attendant issuing the edict was the same, but the edict itself was different. In my previous life, it was an edict marrying me to Xiaoling. This time, my name was replaced with Sikui. Zikui was merely a servant of the Bai family. Even though Xiaoling had petitioned for the edict for her, her status was still too low. So the edict also contained a decree for our Bai family to take Sikui as an adopted daughter, making her the second young lady of the household, on equal footing with me. I tightened my fingertips beneath my sleeves. Without showing it on my face, I rose and accepted the imperial edict on behalf of my maidservant Sikui, who stood beside me. In this life Xiaoling, who got his wish to marry Sikui, had a deathly pale complexion. He was panicked and regretful, barely able to lift his head to look at the expression on my face. It is a mistake. This prince made a mistake. I will go explain everything to Father Emperor. Shi Jin, please bear with it a little longer, wait for me. I tightened my grip on the imperial edict in my hand and pulled the corners of my lips sarcastically. How can an imperial edict be taken back so easily? Didn't the crown prince kneel before Changqing Palace for nothing? Hearing that Xiaoling was going to plead with the monarch to retract the marriage decree, Shikui's figure swayed, as delicate as a willow in the wind, and suddenly fainted to the ground. The instant she fainted, Xiaoling, who had been standing beside me, immediately rushed forward and pulled Shikui into his embrace. Instinctive actions don't lie. Come to think of it, he had doted on Shikui exclusively for a lifetime. If he didn't love her to the bone, how could he have fathered child after child with her? And how could he have schemed in every way to eliminate my possibility of bearing children, so that he could register their illegitimate children under my name, enter them into the imperial genealogy, and make them true royal bloodline? In this life, not only will I not separate them, I will personally send the maid Shikui into the Eastern Palace. When virtue doesn't match one's position, one suffers the burden instead. That's 6 Dragon 3. Phoenix crown isn't so easy to wear. The fainted Shikui had no color in her face, appearing even more pitifully delicate. Xiaoling held her, unable to conceal the anxiety in his eyes. Shijin, if you want to hate someone, hate me. I am the one who is blind, mistaking people in both lifetimes. The imperial edict has been issued. Shi Kui can be considered your sworn sister now. Don't bully her anymore, or treat her like a servant. After saying that, Xiaoling held her and hurried off to find a physician. By dinner time, Shi Kui was personally sent back by Xiaoling. Ixqi Kui, stepping off the carriage, was as cheerful as a little bird. She came to my room, holding a brocade box. Under the candlelight, she lifted half her little face, timidly yet somewhat proudly calling to me. Sister. Now, we've truly become real sisters. Ziyun couldn't stand her arrogant look, and couldn't help but step forward, wanting to strike her. I remained calm and pressed down on her wrist. Shi Kui opened the brocade box. It was all betrothal gifts and rewards sent from the Eastern Palace. Sister, I've come to apologize. I didn't mean to compete with you for the crown prince. In my previous life, it was the same. She was always good at feigning meekness and innocence. If Ziyun went up and slapped her, it would only fall right into her trap. I had suffered such losses before. The flower-pinning banquet in my previous life. Court ladies and daughters of aristocratic families gathered, with me as the crown princess, pinning flowers and bestowing blessings upon them. But hidden among the fresh flowers Shi Kui presented were hornets. The hornets suddenly flew out, stinging anyone they saw. Startled, I pushed Shi Kui away. She fell to the ground, her arm bleeding, quickly staining her palace dress red. In truth, the wound on her arm was a scar she had deliberately cut herself, just waiting to stage a self-sacrificing scheme. The flower-pinning banquet descended into chaos. When Xiaoling rushed over, the first person he helped up was Shi Kui, seeing the bloodstains on her arm, and the smile she forced onto her face. The way Xiaoling looked at me was as cold as evening mist and fog, leaving only disappointment and reproach. He didn't even want to say a single word more to me. Back then, I did have some genuine feelings for him, a young married couple, who doesn't hope to grow old together, to know and accompany each other for life. Even within the cold palace walls, at least my true heart toward him was warm. What is more, I personally saved him, so I hoped that, like in those storybooks, he would be grateful to me and pledge himself to me. Because of this laughable sincerity, I was hurt especially deeply. He didn't speak to me, didn't listen to my explanation, and directly punished me with confinement, making me reflect on my mistakes facing the wall in my chambers. Shi Kui was cunning with her schemes. Just a few hornets nearly cost me my position as crown princess. Those apology gifts she sent, I didn't touch a single one. I originally wanted Ziyun to throw them away, but fearing unnecessary trouble, I simply stuffed them all at the bottom of a trunk. Xiaoling knelt before the Changqing Palace gates again. This time, he knelt for a day and a night, begging the emperor to retract the marriage decree. He said he had mistaken the person. Summoning else had saved him on the mountain road that day. The emperor's word? How could it be treated as child's play? He didn't even get to see the emperor's face, and was directly chased away by the palace servants relaying the message. Falling petals like a dream, drizzling rain like sorrow, looking wretched and soaked through, Xiaoling waited for me outside the Bai family's ancestral hall. His voice was hoarse. Shijin, in this life, can you humble yourself to be my concubine? I promise to treat you well, to make it up to you. In the future, if you want the Empress's position, I'll give it to you too. I waited for him to finish speaking urgently, then sneered and pointed to a small patch of white hemp cloth on the front of my garment. He froze, all sound stuck in his throat. My mother passed away from illness. When parents die, one does not change mourning clothes for 3 years. I must observe mourning for 3 years. I won't marry anyone within 3 years. I finished speaking in a very slow and indifferent voice. In my previous life, when mother heard I was to marry into the Eastern Palace, she was afraid of delaying my marriage, so she forced herself to hold on, clinging to her last breath with bitter medicine, suffering for a long time. In this life, I stayed by mother's side and saw her off peacefully. Xiaoling, standing in the dim curtain of rain, couldn't stop trembling. Water droplets also clung to his eyelashes. His face was ashen as he murmured, "It wasn't like this in the previous life. It shouldn't be like this." My smile carried coldness. Life is like a game of chess, ever changing with each round. Your Highness the Crown Prince, many things are bound to change. For instance, in my previous life, I died at his and Shikui's hands. Who knows, now that this life starts over, who will be the final winner? Did you all notice? In the previous life, Mother was forcing herself to hold on, afraid of delaying her daughter's marriage. She relied on medicine to keep herself alive, suffering through it all. And in this life, the female lead no longer has the marriage into the Eastern Palace, so Mother doesn't need to hold on anymore. She stayed by her side and let her mother pass away peacefully. The marriage that Mother fought desperately to preserve was precisely the knife that killed her daughter in the previous life. It is not some earth-shattering kind of cruelty, but rather that meticulous, dense kind of cruelty. Half a month later, Ixikui was extremely proud, like a sparrow that suddenly flew up to a high branch. As her sister in name, would see her off to her wedding. Before getting into the bridal sedan, Shikui pretended to shed 2 reluctant tears. I don't know why His Highness the Crown Prince became so deeply infatuated with me. Speaking of which, sister, you are the legitimate born daughter, more suitable than me to become the crown princess. She didn't know the reason. I, of course, knew better than anyone. This path adorned with flowers and brocade, cooked in roaring flames and oil. I personally helped her choose it. Since in the previous life, they loved each other obsessively, and hid in the Eastern Palace having so many children. I naturally want to make it happen, to let the world see clearly the Crown Prince's choice. And I hope Xiaoling won't regret it too soon. Zikui smiled through her tears. This sister won't forget elder sister's kindness. I calmly withdrew my hand from her grasp. There is no need for kindness. Securing your position as Crown Princess is what matters most. Zikui was brimming with pride and satisfaction, not taking the Crown Princess's status seriously at all. Sister, rest assured. His Highness the Crown Prince dotes on me and loves me so much, he definitely won't let me be bullied in the Eastern Palace. I smiled. The imperial family is the most heartless of all. She would soon understand this truth. For a woman to stand firm on her own feet, she can never rely solely on a man's fickle affection. Xiaoling, dressed in dragon and phoenix wedding robes to fetch his bride, was just the same as in my previous life, sitting on his tall horse, noble and handsome. But as he passed through the crowd, he gazed deeply at me. Even when escorting the bride into the wedding sedan, there wasn't a trace of joyful smile on his face. I returned to the Bai family residence and ordered the gates closed, stroking the enamel bracelet on my wrist. That day when I punished Sikui, he had prepared 2 options. Either quietly eliminate future troubles once and for all, or expose the truth of my previous life, planting a thorn in Crown Prince Xiaoling's heart that could never be removed. The one he went to such lengths to marry was nothing more than a servant of the Bai family. Even if she was the woman he loved in his previous life, she was just a liar full of schemes who had deceived him for an entire lifetime, using the grace of saving his life. The spy hidden in the Eastern Palace quickly relayed the news back. On the first day of their marriage, Xiaoling rose early, looking weary, showing none of his past life's favoritism towards Sikui. They went to the central palace to serve tea and pay respects. The Empress felt her status was too low, even though she had become an adopted daughter of the Bai family. It was still difficult to conceal her origins as a household servant. Sikui knelt on the ground, respectfully offering tea, but the Empress had not taken it for a long while. Clearly, she looked down on her. If she weren't the Crown Prince's lifesaver, and if the Crown Prince hadn't knelt to beg for this marriage, how could the daughter of a wet nurse be worthy of marrying into the Eastern Palace? Exequi bit her lip, and tears quickly welled up. With teary eyes, she looked toward that python-robed figure. But ever since the wedding, Xiaoling had been absent-minded. He didn't see Shikui's pleading gaze, nor did he say a single word to help her. This was something that would never have happened in her previous life. In her last life, wherever Sikwi was, Xiaoling's gaze would involuntarily fall upon her. Whenever she suffered the slightest grievance, Xiaoling would immediately stand up for her. As soon as Sikwi shed tears, the Empress found her petty demeanor even more detestable. The Empress covered her nose with a handkerchief and chuckled softly. This palace hasn't even said anything yet. Why are you crying for no reason? Others would think this palace has done something to you. The grand wedding only passed a day ago, and you are already crying and wailing, bringing bad luck for nothing. You really don't understand the rules. Have the palace ladies teach you proper etiquette, lest you become crown princess and still make a laughingstock of yourself. Xiaoling left early, saying he still had matters to handle. He left Sikwi in the palace, holding the tea, kneeling for more than half the day. After reading the note, the ice frozen in my eyes did not thaw. But this kind of lesson wasn't enough, far from enough. I want them to love each other as much in their past life, and hate each other to death in this life, loving and killing each other until death. Doesn't Sikwi think that a mother's status rises with her sons? 10 years' time, children one after another, yet my child. The bitter medicinal brew of the Qing palace, that pain. It is her turn to taste it now, same as the trajectory of the previous life. According to custom, after becoming crown princess, a flower-pinning banquet must be held. First, to demonstrate the royal family's status, and second, to bestow blessings upon the wives and young ladies of noble rank. In my previous life, my flower-pinning banquet was ruined by her into a complete mess. Quite a few noble wives and ladies were knocked down and stung. Even though I tried my best to salvage the situation afterward, I still left an extremely poor impression among the aristocratic families. So much so that later on my coronation day as empress, many civil and military officials jumped out to oppose it. At this life's flower-pinning banquet, I am still the young Miss Bai in her boudoir, attending the banquet together with other noble wives and ladies. When Sikwi was in the Bai household, no matter how favored, she was just a servant. No one had taught her how to manage a household, how to host banquets, how to command a scene. Even less did she know which aristocratic families existed in the capital, the closeness or distance of relationships between these families. All these require being steeped in such knowledge from childhood to adulthood. A pheasant can't pretend to be a phoenix. A household slave is a household slave. Even climbing up to the position of crown princess, she still can't become someone above others. The flower-pinning banquet, without anyone deliberately sabotaging it, was still turned into a complete mess by her. The dishes need to be arranged according to the aristocratic family's rank and the status of the ladies with imperial honors. Sikwi doesn't know this. Hairpin flowers are also divided into flower kings and flower fairies. She likewise knows nothing of this at all. In my previous life, I had already been cautious about these matters and consulted with the Empress to ensure everything was foolproof. She felt ashamed of her status, and after being punished, she saw the Empress like a mouse sees a cat. How would she dare set foot in the central palace? The dishes were wrong. The flowers she bought, she didn't know the varieties, and the palace servants tailored their service to the person, passing off inferior goods as quality ones. Sikwi sat in the crown princess's main seat, flustered and overwhelmed. Soon, discussions at the hairpin flower banquet were endless, and everyone knew about her servant status. Many noble ladies maintained their etiquette, found an excuse, and gradually more than half of them left. Looking at the emptied hairpin flower banquet, and the sneers from those noble ladies directed at her, Sikwi's face burned hot, and regardless of the occasion or place, she shed tears of grievance and humiliation. The hairpin flower banquet was originally a ceremony to showcase the crown princess's status. As the crown prince, it was inconvenient for him to intervene. Xiaoling, sitting beside her, frowned in annoyance after seeing her cry. His gaze swept over the empty hairpin flower banquet, and he flicked his sleeves, irritated and feeling humiliated. I sat in an inconspicuous spot at the banquet, watching this farce from beginning to end. Xiaoling threw down the wine cup in his hand heavily and complained coldly. In the previous life, you were gentle and understanding, and I was very fond of you. Why is it that in this life, you can't do anything? You are not even half as good as her. I naturally knew clearly who Xiaoling was talking about. In the previous life, I handled all matters properly for him, and he only needed to sit back and enjoy the results. Ixuqui didn't get to sit in the crown princess's position, didn't need to handle household affairs, and just focused on pleasing him, capturing his heart, playing obedient and fragile. In comparison, Xiqui, who catered to him in every way, made him feel fresh and comfortable. But this life is different. I pushed Xiqui onto a position that never belonged to her. With comparison came disparity. In Xiaoling's heart, there was also enormous disappointment and resentment. From loving couple to bitter enemies, death by 1,000 cuts. I curved my lips slightly. This is only just the beginning. After the hairpin flower banquet ended on bad terms. Instead of thinking about cleaning up the mess, Ixuqui actually wanted to come cause trouble for me. Her vision truly matches her fate later on. A woman's sight shouldn't be confined to the inner chambers, confined to fighting with others, but should be more far-reaching, grasping power and influence to keep herself undefeatable. This truth is something I only fully understood after dying once. The palace maid beside her stopped me. You must be Miss Bai. The crown princess invites you for a meeting. I followed her to the familiar bedchamber. The moment I stepped into the room, her trusted palace maid shouted sharply, "In the presence of the crown princess, why don't you kneel?" I chuckled lightly. Now that little sister has become crown princess, have you forgotten that the Bai family raised you all these years? How about little sister kneels to her former master first, repays the Bai family's kindness, and then I'll kneel to you, the new master. Ziqui's expression stiffened. She waved away the palace maids around her, then smiled innocently and warmly. Sister, you've misunderstood. It is just that those palace maids are too focused on the rules. How could I bear to let sister kneel before me? I took out the wedding gift I had prepared. For sister and his highness's wedding joy, you don't have much to give you. Only this necklace, it was left behind by mother. This necklace was also the one she found from mother's belongings and gave to me in my previous life, precisely because it was mother's relic. I never suspected it and wore it on my body every day. Who knew she had hollowed it out and stuffed it with red musk, causing me to lose hope each and every time I had some expectation. Ixuqui grew up with me, and mother treated her the same as she treated me, caring for her attentively. I never expected she would use mother to harm me to this extent. Seeing the necklace I presented, Ixuqui's eyes reddened. She wouldn't accept other things, but seeing this necklace, unless she truly had a heart of stone, she would definitely accept it. Half a year's time. Xiaoling, who should have deeply won the emperor's favor, in this life has been scolded repeatedly. The palace has even spread news several times about deposing the crown prince and establishing another heir. In my previous life, many of Xiaoling's memorials and documents were polished by me. Even many policies were ones I helped him devise, helping him secure his position as crown prince early on. But in this life, Ixuqui by his side is illiterate and never had the qualifications to attend the clan's school. The only thing she knows is those little schemes of hers, and whenever she has free time, she clings to the crown prince day and night, vying for favor and seeking credit. Having risen to power through dishonorable means, she couldn't tolerate other palace maids around her following her example to get close to the crown prince. In order to secure her position as crown princess. In this lifetime, Ziqui desperately made things difficult for and suppressed any palace maids with even a hint of beauty, doing everything possible to squeeze them out. For the palace maids who suffered her torment, she wouldn't even allow the imperial physicians to come examine them. Many palace maids were thus damaged in both body and mind, no longer resembling their former selves. Until she was discovered by Shu Liangdi, who had just entered the Eastern Palace. Shu Liangdi was shocked at the sight and cried out on the spot. This incident alarmed the Empress. The Empress stepped in, sent those suffering palace maids out of the palace, and gave them a substantial sum of settlement silver to put the matter to rest. Because of this incident, the crown prince was severely reprimanded. Zikui was kept in the central palace, kneeling before the solemn and exquisite Buddha statue to repent. Originally, the Empress wanted her to copy Buddhist scriptures, but who would have thought she was actually illiterate? The Empress nearly fainted from anger, and in the end could only make her recite the difficult sutras. Xiaoling left the Eastern Palace and came to the entrance of the Bai family home. In his python robe and the same brocade jade belt, wearing them on his body now carried an air of dejection and decline. In just the half-year since the marriage, he seemed to have lost quite a bit of weight, his eyes filled with bloodshot veins. Upon seeing me, Xiaoling was overcome with mixed emotions. Seeing him, I too had nothing to say. If the crown prince has no business, please don't block my way. As I brushed past him, like a statue, motionless, the person gripped my sleeve. Shijin, I regret it. His voice choked, bitter and strained. In my past life, I wronged you so much, not knowing you were so important to me. I laughed bitterly. He didn't regret it, he was scared. Only after replacing me with someone else did he realize my importance. I was his wife, his subject, helping him manage the Eastern Palace, helping him pave his path forward. Without me, he accomplished nothing. Even his position as crown prince was in jeopardy. In his lowered eyes appeared a trace of calculation and resentment. Thinking about it now, many things weren't done by you. Others schemed and framed you. I wrongly blamed you, and even caused your death on the day of your enthronement as empress. In this life, what must I do to have you return to my side? He asked helplessly, cautiously. Hatred congealed in my throat, almost turning into crimson blood. I slowly swallowed the surging emotions in my throat, and slowly smiled. It is absolutely impossible now. I didn't turn back to look. Nor did I care what expression was on Xiaoling's face at this moment, stepping onto the carriage and leaving. There were more important matters waiting for me to plan. I would make them pay the ultimate price. For half a year, Shi Kui had been clinging to Xiaoling in every way possible, yet her belly remained without any signs. Born of lowly origins and despised by the Empress, she needed an heir by her side even more. A palace maid in the Eastern Palace mentioned, "There is a miracle doctor at the temple in the east of the city who is very effective. He has a secret remedy that he won't sell for any amount of gold. But every woman who is drunk it has quickly gotten pregnant." Zikui, desperate in her illness, secretly took note of this. The day she appeared wearing a veiled hat, I wasn't surprised at all, sitting leisurely behind the curtain, listening to her high and mighty voice that couldn't conceal her urgency. "Are you really a miracle doctor? If I drink your medicine, will I definitely be able to conceive? I am telling you, I am of noble status. If you dare deceive me, I'll make sure you regret it." The miracle doctor had seen too many noble ladies from wealthy families, and wasn't afraid at all. Madam, excessive liver fire also makes it difficult to conceive. If you don't trust this old one's medical skills, you are welcome to seek another expert. Zikui stiffened. "First extend your hand. This old one will take your pulse." After extending her hand for a while, she asked nervously, "How is it? What is wrong with my body? Can it be treated?" The miracle doctor stroked his beard and just shook his head. "Madam is in good health. It seems the problem lies with your husband. Why don't you have him come over so we can examine him together?" How could Xiaoling, as the crown prince, possibly appear in such a place? The miracle doctor also saw her difficulty and said, "How about this? This old one will first prescribe a kidney, tonifying and chi-boosting medicine. Take it back and have him drink it. There should be a turning point." Zikui asked him how much it would cost. The divine physician held up 5 fingers, 500 taels of silver. "This prescription of mine is not shared with outsiders. Drink it and it will definitely work. If it doesn't work, Madam can bring people to smash my stall." After biting her teeth hard, she withdrew from the palace accounts to give out 500 taels in cash. After Sikwi left, he walked out from behind the curtain. The divine physician lost his earlier composure and suddenly dropped to his knees before me with a thud. "Miss, please spare me this once. I'll leave the capital right now and never come back to swindle people again." That is right. This so-called divine physician was just a charlatan. After I exposed his scam, I only needed to threaten him slightly with reporting to the authorities, and he obediently complied, helping me put on this act. I had Zion write down his name and household registration, and said to him, "The evidence is all with me. As long as I hear any news of you selling fake medicine in the future, I will immediately submit it to the authorities and have you spend the rest of your life in prison." Yes, yes. This kind of charlatan has multiple hideouts. Catching him again won't be easy. Leaving the temple, Zion fastened my cloak for me. "Mrs. So prescient, truly amazing. Will Sikki really give the crown prince this medicine of unknown origin?" I said calmly, "She definitely will. 500 taels of silver is enough to buy dozens of household servants like her." I deliberately had the divine physician ask for a high price to make her feel the pinch, to make her have to give it a try. After returning, Iksikwi hesitated several times, but eventually dismissed the palace servants and put the powder into the tea the crown prince regularly drank. The sky was just beginning to lighten. Zion couldn't wait to come report the news to me. I asked with a hint of drowsiness. "Something happened at the Eastern Palace?" "Yes." Zion's face was full of excitement. "The crown prince was poisoned and fell into a coma. His life hangs by a thread. Zikwi's poisoning was discovered. She has already been stripped of her crown princess status and thrown into prison awaiting trial." After her excitement, Zion became somewhat worried. "Will they trace it back to us?" I looked at the breeze blowing past the duckweed outside the window and smiled indifferently. "No, they won't. They can't even catch that fake doctor." Zikwi in prison, after 3 court trials and several harsh interrogations, finally confessed to buying the medicine from outside the palace. When the officers went to search for him, the temple in the eastern part of the city had long been abandoned, and they questioned people in the area. No one knew the whereabouts of that wandering quack doctor. To find that person would take several years at least, and the case might never be closed. After several sleepless nights of treatment by the imperial physicians, Xiaoling finally awoke and survived. Upon learning it was Zikwi who poisoned him, he flew into a rage and cursed her furiously. On the day of sentencing, he personally issued an edict stripping her of her status, banishing her to the cold palace never to see her again. Deep affection across 2 lifetimes. Nothing but a joke. This whole fake doctor scheme was a textbook level open conspiracy. She didn't poison anyone herself, didn't personally harm Zikwi. She just placed a stone on the path Zikwi was bound to take. She knew Zikwi desperately needed a child to secure her position. Knew she would dare to drug the crown prince's tea. Because that is exactly what she did in the previous life, and the most ironic part. Xiaoling personally sent Zikwi to her doom. In the previous life, he pushed Bai Shijin for Zikwi's sake. In this life, he personally sent Zikwi into an abyss of eternal damnation. Xiaoling came looking for me again. This time he looked as panicked as a stray dog. The drug Zikwi gave him was potent. The imperial physician pulled him back from death's door, but it left irreversible aftereffects. The once high-spirited man now had a few strands of prematurely white hair at his temples. When Xiaoling smiled, there was a hint of flattery that had never been there before. He took out an oil paper package from his chest. "Folding cake, your favorite. I learned from the cook and made it myself." On those hands were several freshly cut wounds. He wanted to use this clumsy method to seek my forgiveness. "Shijin, eat it while it is hot. See how my cooking skills are." I picked up a piece of the white translucent pastry, but didn't put it in my mouth. In the previous life, to make him stay with me for a couple more days. I also secretly learned cooking for a long time, waiting for him to return every day, bringing him steaming hot soup. Lotus seed and pigeon soup, was it good? He was stunned for a moment, then immediately understood that I was asking him about his past life. Xiaoling nodded repeatedly. Shi Jin's cooking was excellent. I finished it all, only regretting that I can never drink it again in this life. The final sigh was full of loss, spoken from the bottom of his heart, but I just laughed bitterly. You see, I never made him lotus seed and pigeon soup, because he didn't like the slight bitterness of lotus seeds. As one can imagine, the meals I carefully prepared, the clear soup I tended over a small stove, all went into Shikui's belly. Mentioning past events, Xiaoling's eyes reddened. With a choked voice, he asked me, Shi Jin, if I hadn't mistaken my savior, could we have been a harmonious couple, emperor and empress in perfect harmony, becoming a tale of devotion passed down through history? I didn't answer. Mistaking his savior was no excuse for treating his wife so coldly. How could one trust a heartless man? In my silence, he was on the verge of tears. Shi Jin, ye regret it. I've long regretted it. In this life you saved me. Why did you give Shikui's name? Why didn't you tell me your true identity? Making me miss you again. He actually blamed me in a low voice. I laughed softly. Your Highness, you and Shikui had many children and grandchildren in your past life, and you even indulged her wearing my phoenix robe. Your feelings for her ran so deep. How could I not fulfill that? Xiaoling's face flushed red, then turned deathly pale. After a long while, he murmured, That was all from the previous life. I've already made her pay the price. Please forgive me. Without you, I've realized how difficult my situation is. Can you help me one more time? I can give you the position of crown princess. I stared at him for a long time, then smiled. All right. Xiaoling's face filled with joy. I knew it. In the entire Eastern Palace, across both lifetimes. Only you have been sincere to me. That wicked woman Shikui stole your life, saving grace and deceived me for an entire lifetime. I've already had her exiled to a faraway place, never to rise again in this life. How could Shikui's fate alone be enough? It is not nearly enough to dispel the resentment and rage in my chest. Suppressing the resistance in my heart, I offered him strategies, mentioning the locust plague that would soon occur. In the previous life, after a long drought in the prosperous lands of Jiangyan, a locust plague broke out. As long as your highness personally transports grain to Jiangnan to provide disaster relief, and handles everything personally, without delegating to others, you'll win the hearts of the people, and restore your image in His Majesty's eyes. I finished speaking slowly. The more Xiaoling listened, the brighter his eyes became. Finally, he clapped his hands excitedly and said, I remember it all now. Yes, yes, yes. A locust plague will happen soon. I'll go prepare right away. Watching his eagerly departing figure, the smile on my lips was cold as a blade. In my previous life, I exhausted all my efforts to operate and plan these matters for him. And Xiaoling, that good, for nothing, merely showed his face under the scorching sun to stabilize people's hearts. Yet he complained endlessly, disgusted by the stench of the disaster victims. Soon he couldn't help but slip into the tent to fool around with Shikui for amusement. In my last life, I could elevate him to great heights. In this life, I will personally send him plummeting into the abyss. I tied the secret letter I had written to a skylark that flew by, and raised my hand to send it into the clouds. Go tell your master that the crown prince has fallen into the trap. 3 months later, Jiangyan, just like in my previous life, suffered a sudden locust plague. The people had no harvest at all, with barren lands stretching for thousands of miles. When all the court officials were at their wits' end, Xiaoling stepped forward, saying he once had a dream where an immortal told him there would be a disaster, so he had stockpiled quite a bit of grain, which could be used to provide disaster relief. After hearing this, the emperor was greatly pleased and dispatched him to transport grain and provisions. Rushing to Jiangnan immediately, Xiaoling personally transported the grain to Jiangnan. Sacks of millet filled a full 100 ox carts. He was beaming with pride. As long as he achieved merit this time, Absolutely no one could shake his position as crown prince. Open the sacks and distribute the grain. With one command, the coarse burlap sacks were opened, and what poured out was not grain or rice. It was all weeds and gravel. The disaster victims came with their entire families. Having heard that the crown prince was providing relief and had brought countless grains of rice, so they wouldn't have to go hungry anymore. Who could have imagined that inside was nothing but useless dirt and sand that couldn't fill their stomachs? In an instant, cold sweat poured down, soaking through the python embroidered robe on Xiaoling's body. How could this happen? I personally watched them load the rice. Who switched it out? Before he could figure it out, the starving disaster victims erupted into a riot, all breaking through the soldiers' blockade and surging forward. This riot was only quelled when the crown prince's uncle, the Huai prince, led troops to the scene. He had people distribute porridge and grain again. Those who were strong-bodied received less. The elderly, weak, women, and children received more. Zhangyan finally returned to peace. The crown prince who went missing during this riot was delivered into my hands by the Huai prince. The sack was opened, and the unconscious Xiaoling fell before me. I picked up a cup of cold tea and poured it on him to wake him up. Shijin, upon waking and seeing me, Xiaoling looked as if he'd seen his savior. Shijin, help me one more time. I'll definitely do it right this time. You'll save me, won't you? Through 2 lives, 2 lifetimes. It has been you who never abandoned me and helped me ascend to the throne. As long as you let me go back, I'll immediately confer upon you the title of Crown Princess. He had lost the grace and bearing of his previous life. Fear made him pathetically humble, kneeling before me in an unspeakably ugly display of abasement, begging me to help him this once, begging me to let him go. I merely made a gesture. The 2 guards beside the Prince of Huai unceremoniously grabbed him and dragged him up to the towering city wall. The view from the city wall was excellent. The passing night wind ruffled the hair by my ears. Unfortunately, Xiaoling had no interest in admiring the night scenery. His teeth chattering, he asked me incoherently, Shijin, why bring me here? Is it because you want to give me some surprise? I smiled and leaned close to his ear. Just like how he had sighed and whispered reproachfully in my ear in my previous life. Letting you taste what it is like to fall from a height. Is that a surprise? By Shijin, you can't. I already know I was wrong. What use is knowing you were wrong? Can one sentence make up for the pain and grievances I suffered over 10 years? Make up for the despair of falling from the high platform? Bind him to the battlements of the city wall. Let him feel the terror of falling in the bitter night wind. Let him spend the entire night savoring the despair I felt when I fell from the high platform in my previous life. His pleading voice gradually weakened in the night wind. By daybreak, there was no more sound below the city wall. I coldly watched the motionless person below the city wall, then went to report back to the Prince of Huai. The crown prince, fearing his crimes, took his own life and jumped off the city tower. This Prince Huai, ruthless in battle, strategic and ambitious, stood with his hands behind his back, gazing down at me for a long while, then suddenly asked me, Miss Bai, would you be willing to become this king's consort? I didn't hesitate for a moment, replying calm as water, I would not, but I want a written pardon from Prince Huai himself. I needed to ensure that after he ascended the throne, he wouldn't strike me down. His thin lips curved slightly as he chuckled softly. Good thing you are this king's ally, not his enemy. That fool Xiaoling was truly blind. That night, I left Prince Huai's camp tent. Ziyun was waiting for me in the carriage. Miss Everything has been packed up properly. I glanced at the night sky and said indifferently, the winds rise across the 9 provinces. The realm should have a new sky. Many years later, through the turmoil of war, the kingdom changed hands. Upon West Lake, a small boat slowly drifted out from deep within the drooping willows. The warm spring light fell upon her peacefully sleeping. Serene face. A light boat crosses distant mountains. A person on the path like jade. What impressed me most was actually that detail in the middle about the lotus seed and pigeon soup. Xiaoling said, "Shijin's cooking is excellent, I finished it all." But she had never made him lotus seed and pigeon soup because he didn't like the clean bitterness of lotus seeds. In other words, in her previous life, Bai Shijin watched over the small stove every day, carefully stewing soups, but he never actually drank them. They were all given to Zikui instead, and he even remembered the taste wrong, thinking he had drunk it himself. He didn't even know what dishes she made, yet thought he understood her well. He had even forgotten what flavors he disliked, because all his taste memories belonged to another woman. This detail is more cruel than any grand scene. What kind of marriage is this? You cook every day waiting for him to come home. He takes your food and gives it to another woman. Then 2 lifetimes later says to you affectionately, "Your cooking is so delicious." He can't even be bothered to properly betray you. And then there is that final ending. The Huai prince asked if she was willing to be his consort. She said no. This no is the soul of the entire story. In her previous life, Bai Shijin bet all her chips on one man, the grace of saving his life, her sincere devotion, being a virtuous wife and loving mother, only to be pushed off the high platform in return. In this life she learned one thing: never entrust herself to anyone again. She doesn't want to be crown princess, doesn't want to be a consort, she only wants a pardon from execution. Because power and promises will change, only a life-protecting talisman written on paper is real. That final scene, a flatboat on West Lake, spring light falling on her face. She finally no longer has to make soup for anyone. What do you think is the core reason why Xiaoling gave his heart to the wrong person in both lives? A blind as a bat, mistaking his savior based on appearances alone, obsession too deep, heartless and ungrateful, only favoring the gentle and delicate Zikui, ignoring Bai Shijin's devotion, see stupid and incompetent, lacking the ability to distinguish right from wrong, blinded by Zikui's schemes, selfish and self-serving, only caring about his own feelings and the crown prince position. Never truly loved anyone. I personally choose D and B. What do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments. See you next time.